So hello everyone. Thank you for joining into our second Zoom recording as part of our virtual recruitment to hopefully give you a better sense of what we're about here at Methodist University Hospital. Hopefully offer a little bit of insight into our personalities and our culture, and then make it a little bit clearer to you if Methodist University Hospital is the right fit for you. So we will start with some introductions. I am Lauren Bridey. I'm the current PGY2 internal medicine resident. I also did my PGY1 residency here at Methodist University as well, and I loved it so much that I decided to stay on and do a second year. So far, so good. But I'm extremely pumped to be able to facilitate this recording because I get to put some of my preceptors on the spot for once and get to ask them questions. So I'm very excited, and we will get started with letting the preceptors introduce themselves. You can just say your name, where you practice, maybe where you did your training or how long you've been with Methodist. And we will get started with Twilla.
Hi, I am Jennifer Twilla, and I go by Twilla most of the time. A few people I may call me Dr. Twilla, but typically that's only like Kate. Anyways, I have been here for almost 11 years now, and I am the clinical pharmacy manager. And before I became the clinical pharmacy manager, I practiced as an internal medicine specialist, and I completed my PGY2 in internal medicine here. I'm also the PGY1 residency program director. I've been that for about 5 years now. Certainly not for long, as my boy Tate is about to take that over.
All right, well, with that, we will switch over to Tate, or as I call Tate.
Thank you for that nice introduction. But my name is Tate Cutshaw. I'm one of the internal medicine clinical specialists. I did my PGY1 at Methodist University Hospital way back when in 2015. We do have some more senior preceptors on the call that you'll hear from today, though. But and I did my PGY2 at Houston Methodist, and then worked at UAB for a year before coming back to Methodist in 2018. So I've been here just over 2 years.
Right. Well, naturally with that, we have to shift over to Carolyn.
One of the more seasoned preceptors. Shot fired. I am Carolyn. I'm a transplant specialist. I've been here since 2011 when I did my PGY2 in transplant. I'm also the team leader, so that's me.
Thank you. All right, now we have Lisa.
My name is Lisa. I'm one of the emergency medicine clinical specialists. I work in the evening time because I don't like to get up early. And I did my PGY1 at the University of Toledo in Toledo, Ohio, and did my PGY2 in critical care at the University of Utah. And I have been here 2 years, started my third year this year.
Very cool. All right, Chelsea.
I'm Chelsea. I am the CVICU pharmacist / COVID ICU pharmacist currently at Methodist, and I like to move all over the country apparently. So I did my schooling at the University of Colorado in Denver. I did my PGY1 at Methodist. My second year I did in critical care at Froedtert in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I just couldn't stay away, so I came back to Methodist, and now I have officially been there for 1 year.
Whoop, whoop. All right, and last but not least, we have Dennis.
So I am Dennis Marjanku. I am the bone marrow transplant and malignant heme clinical pharmacy specialist. I did both my PGY1 and 2 residencies at Geisinger in small town in Pennsylvania, and I have been here about 13 months now.
Yes, Dennis is one of our newer preceptors, but definitely still very involved in the residency program, and so we are very happy to have Dennis on our team now. All right, so it's pretty clear just from hearing everyone's introductions that all of our preceptors are PGY1 and PGY2 trained, so that's definitely a perk, and we learn a lot from them, especially having preceptors come from all different places. Not everyone did their training here at Methodist, so we definitely have a wide variety of perspectives, which is very awesome. So we will get started with our first question, and this will be probably a good question for you, either Tate or Twilla, that y'all can answer. So what is the overall style of the preceptors in the program?
Kate, you want me to take this one? You want me to jump in on it?
You jump in
got
first, Will, and I'll come in on the back half.
All right, I got it. So I would say the overall style is definitely going to depend on the preceptor. We all have our unique personalities and things that we've molded and adapted from our training that we're going to bring to the table. However, I think the overall culture here in the environment is a very challenging environment where the preceptors are going to make sure that you are well-rounded when you leave their rotation. Some of them are laid back, some of them are laid back, but the main thing that's consistent among all of them is their investment in the resident and ensuring they understand what their goals are and that they help the resident meet their goals. So I think that is the consistent piece across the spectrum of preceptors that we have, is that they're engaged and they're invested in the residents' learning and helping them achieve their personal goals.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it definitely depends too on the rotation experience that the residents are on. But I think that we do a good job of role modeling on rotations, kind of at first to show the residents kind of how we function and how we work as clinical pharmacists. And then I think we do a good job of kind of pushing the resident to kind of own the team and kind of own that service that they're on for that month. I think kind of like Twila was saying, we are very invested as a preceptor group to the residents' learnings. I mean, we try to get them involved in any review papers that we're doing. We work with them with CEs and come up with good ideas for them. I've given a couple of residents some peer reviews to work on with me, case reports, all kinds of things. So I think we're definitely, like Twila was saying, a challenging program. We don't handhold because we know that that's going to make you a well-rounded clinical pharmacist whenever you get out of residency.
Yeah, and I can attest to everything that they have said. Definitely feel like I've had a ton of autonomy, but even on rotations where I wasn't quite as familiar, they were more than willing to stay with me an extra day on rounds if I needed it. So I definitely feel like they're there to kind of cater the experience and the rotation to you and what you need. And then just like Tate was saying, I've had papers and projects that I've wanted to work on, and it did not take long. I just had to say that I was interested, and then within like a week, I had people reaching out to me, trying to get me involved on what they were working on. So definitely very invested preceptors, and that's really one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to stay to do my PGY2 here, is because of the preceptors and how invested they are. And there really is a personality for everyone. We have a wide variety, but they're all so fun and you can't not like them. So I think they're great.
Yeah.
All right.
Can I just say, Kate, if you will just refer to me as Dr. Twila from here on out, I would appreciate it.
Dr. Twila? Okay, Dr.
Yeah.
Twila. I can't do that.
Yeah.
You know I can't do that.
So moving on to our next question. What do you believe are the strengths and weaknesses of the program? And anyone can answer this question.
I want to just kind of piggyback on the comments that you guys just had, since I did my first year of residency at Methodist and then I did my second year away. At my PGY2, our staffing model required us to do week-long staffing because it was a 7 on, 7 off model with all the ICU pharmacists there. So if someone took a week off, we filled in and that was our staffing. And jumping into that could have been scary, but because I was so autonomous during my PGY1, I felt great just interacting with the team and taking charge at night. There was no one there to back me up. And because we went over, my staffing place was the medical ICU. And I trained really hard in multiple ICU rotations at Methodist. So I knew the literature and I knew what I was talking about during emergencies at night. And I had that confidence to do so. Another strength that probably Lisa can talk about is, even though we have the ED being 7 on, 7 off, they have a really good handoff. So I'll let you talk about that, Lisa.
Yeah, I would say one thing that I was going to say, and I'll piggyback on what Chelsea said, is we have really sick patients here. And so like the acuity of patients that we have is really sick, and that forces you to learn a lot about those sick patients and how to take care of them. And so I think that's a big plus of our program. I think that as you care for a really sick patient, you see the whole picture, and you also we have a very underserved population here in Memphis, and so you figure out how to serve them with the least amount of resources that you have. And then just to speak to what Chelsea was talking about, we do have a 7-on, 7-off model here in our ER for our pharmacists, but you learn that communication tool when you work in that kind of 7-on, 7-on aspect. And so we do a lot of handoff between our pharmacists. And so we kind of work with our residents to work in that communication piece as well as you work in our team of 4 pharmacists. And so when you come down to the ER, we work with really sick patients, not a lot of resources, and work on that communication skill. And so I think that's a really big benefit to our program.
I'll say, as someone who did a PGY1 somewhere else, that our research process is a strength because you have a committee, you have people who are familiar with your research topic, and then you usually have someone who's less familiar. So they can help point out things that to them might be not obvious, so that you can get a lot of clarity. So the process is to set up residents for success so that you have everything together prior to doing the research. So that's a big strength. Also, I will mention that we learn every year from our residents. So they take feedback from residents in their quarterlies and at the end of the year, and you can see it be implemented in the next year.
I think one thing too is the physician relationships, and that's something that I really wanted. That's what brought me back to Methodist. It's one of the big things that brought me back was feeling valued on the team. And they one of the medicine attendings used to always tell me that I view pharmacy not just as a part of the team, but as co-attendings. They're co-teachers for the medical residents, and they're there to teach the pharmacy residents as well. And so I think that really benefits the pharmacy resident that comes on to an experience, because they kind of, they're within that same kind of, that scope. They view them as pharmacy, and pharmacy is very well respected. And so oftentimes, they'll ask the residents whenever they're on the team, questions and direct questions towards them, because they know that they're on that learning experience and that they need that experience, those questions to be kind of fielded to them. So I think our physician relationships are really, really strong in Methodist.
Those relationships definitely, we still have that on CV surgery as well. And when our physicians are in the OR, they expect us to be getting stuff done. So I'm not usually having to ask them about every single change. They just want to make sure that their post-op patient's blood pressure is under control. And part of the reason why I came back is because we're trying to expand some of our CV surgery service lines. But I would say one of the weaknesses we have right now is that they're not fully expanded. We're not doing ECMO at Methodist University right now. They're doing some at Germantown. But even though we're not doing all of those things, and hopefully will be really soon, we can all teach you everything you need to know about that. So I trained in a center where we had at least 3 to 4 ECMO patients at all times. I'm going to be able to teach you everything that you need to know to function, and going on bypass for a cabbage is pretty much just the same. So we'll just send you to the OR to learn about that. And we can have video calls or whatever with people from other hospitals, because we all train in different places. So we have a big network if you want to discuss things with people in different parts of the country and see how they practice there.
I would say another weakness or a limitation of our program is that we don't have a dedicated ID rotation, but I think that every one of us does a dedicated job of trying to think and teach about ID subjects that are relevant to our workflow. So when you're in the ER, I'm definitely going to tell you about when we review urine cultures, the specific ID things that I know about in resistance patterns for those particular bugs. And I know that when you go to transplant, they're going to talk about specific ID things that are relevant to their workflow. And when you go to HEMONC, to those rotations, that they're really, I think, very dedicated to trying to pull those things into their rotations, because we don't have a specific set aside ID rotation. So I think that may be a weakness, but we're all working to try and pull that together so that you get that information.
And if
Yeah,
you
and
love
I'll
ID,
say-
you can still be an ID pharmacist. I know, sorry, my cat is just in the background. My co-resident Taylor went on to do a PGY2 in ID and is now an ID fellow. And the year above me, I think, was Jared, and now he's an ID pharmacist. So it's not a limitation to not have it in your PGY1.
And I would argue from a hem-onc perspective, what's exciting is we have a lot of expansion that we're undergoing right now. So our solid tumor clinics are getting a lot bigger. We're seeing a lot more patients. Plus, on the inpatient side, we have a lot of bone marrow transplants that we do. We're one of the best centers in the state, if not the country. We have CAR T, which a lot of centers aren't doing, but we're kind of doing a lot of CAR T and trying to get some of the newer CAR T products. So from the oncology standpoint, I would argue that just the amount of growth we're going through is pretty exciting. From a weakness perspective, though, we are going through a lot of growth, so we are seeing a lot of those growing pains as well. But it's an exciting time because we're figuring out how to kind of adjust to all these different things.
Yeah, and I think that leads perfectly kind of into my next question. Obviously, we have COVID going on, which is one of the main reasons why we are having to do virtual recruitment. But with COVID, I personally have not really felt like my rotation or my residency experience was altered or impacted in any sort of negative way, which is something I'm very thankful for, because I know just from talking to some of my other friends who are residents at other places, they've had their experiences dramatically changed in what I think is not the best way. And so I'm very thankful for our program for really doing all that they could to adapt in truly unforeseen circumstances to help make sure that our learning is still going to be top notch. And so my question for y'all would be, how have you adapted your different rotations to meet COVID conditions?
I'll take that first because I haven't had to adapt too much because all the transplant patients are getting screened up front. So we usually know whether they're COVID positive or not. So that's the good benefit. And we still have to educate our patients regardless. One thing that has been something to get used to, which sometimes I still forget, is making sure our residents aren't in COVID units prior to rotation, because that would alter the contact they would have. But because we still have to see our patients, we haven't had to change as much, or we may condense what would normally be 2 different days of educations into 1 day.
I can speak to the ER. We really didn't change a terrible lot about what we're doing because we're still caring for patients. We're spending a lot more time outside the room when we would normally have been in the room for a code or an intubation, but we'll often get everything ready and pass it off to the nurse or the physician and then stand outside the room. But we are obviously wearing an N95 instead of just wearing a regular mask, since we don't really know who is COVID positive and who isn't in the ER. And then unfortunately, we've been a little bit limited in that we're standing outside the room a bit more than we would normally have. But we're still doing a lot of kind of more discussions with the nurses if we can't always go in the room. So
my rotation changed dramatically, but it didn't reduce any contact time. It probably made more. So, and it made my residents and myself work closer with these other pharmacists. So the CVICU became our COVID unit. So I'm officially the longest standing COVID unit member that there is, and have been up there more than any other person. So I've worked really closely with Lisa and Anna down in the ED getting handoffs. So my residents get to practice that whole process of handing off from one level of care to another. And Dennis obviously can't come over to the COVID unit and then go back and see more bone marrow transplant patients. So when those patients come over, we have worked closely, and I'd say our department's really close and everyone's friends. So it's easy to just call them up and say, hey, this patient's going to run out of their Jakafi like we did the other day. And how can I get more? Because I don't really know what I'm doing with this drug. Please help me, Dennis. So there's that. But my rotation during the peak of COVID was a COVID rotation. Surgeries went down except for emergent surgeries, so we could follow them from afar, but we kept all of the CV surgery topics going. And I tried to incorporate some more ARDS aspects, which those topics of hemodynamics still apply to CV surgery. And then because we're sitting in there in full PPE all the time and the nurses are right outside, I just make the residents go out and teach the nurses. So Catherine's on rotation with me now. She's been drawing beautiful whiteboards and then going out, and I force her to teach the nurses, and those whiteboards get to hang in the unit. It's been really fun. Now COVID's winding down a little bit for probably a short period of time, and we're getting to go round again with CV surgery as that service picks up. So we've been able to follow both, but the learning hasn't stopped, and there's just more masks.
From a medicine standpoint, our structure has kind of changed pretty significantly. We used to go around on patients at bedside and spend most of our time kind of walking around and seeing patients physically, but we've kind of more shifted towards a table rounding type of rounding experience. So I think that it's freed up more time because we're not traveling between patient rooms as much. So I think we do more teaching with our attendings, and I think our residents are getting to kind of teach the teams more about things, and we're getting more questions about kind of more specific things, and we're being able to expand on certain questions that come up from drug therapies and things like that. But just recently, we've kind of started to go after our table rounds and see some of the new patients with the team, and I've been sending the residents to do that with the team so that they get that experience as well. And used to, we have a morning report session where they would go, the residents would go in the mornings every morning and kind of hear about patients that got admitted overnight. And kind of, it's a good teaching environment for them to hear about new cases and how to think about differential diagnosis and creating a plan for a patient. And recently that's kind of been opening back up as well. And so we've been sending our residents on the days where our teams are specifically meeting for post-call rounds in the morning report room. So they're getting to attend that now as well. So things are kind of starting to get a little bit more back to normal, but we have kind of had a more limited patient viewing experience on rounds.
And from my end, our workflow hasn't changed that much. It did when COVID first came out. We essentially stopped all, if not, or most, if not all of our transplants. But since in the last few months, we've actually ramped back up. Now we just kind of screen patients before they come in, and then right when they come in before we start the process of their transplant. So other than that, the workflow hasn't changed, other than if one of our patients does end up testing COVID positive and they have to go to the COVID floor, then kind of dealing with them more peripherally. But overall, it's largely been the same from like a logistical workflow standpoint.
Yeah, and as we all know, were you gonna say something, Twila?
I was just gonna say a general comment because no one cares about how the admin rotation changed. But the general comment about from the admin team was that we were not going to send pharmacists to do remote work from home. And that was a decision not only made at university, but from a system level, because we wanted to show that pharmacists were essential to the patient care that was going on here, and that they needed to be present to be able to provide that care. Certainly, we wanted to ensure that we were maintaining a safe environment, and all the precautions and parameters that needed to be set up to maintain that environment were done. But at the same time, we are needed and are an essential caregiver. And so we wanted to showcase that by ensuring that our pharmacists were here, including the residents. They are pharmacy and pharmacist extenders. And so we wanted them to also be involved in kind of this unique situation that we were all facing together and trying to figure out how to navigate that. They were an essential part of that.
Yeah, we definitely, like I said earlier, we were never cut out of anything. We felt we maybe even had a little bit more responsibility, which was honestly a really good learning opportunity, and something I know we can always talk about, that we were residents during COVID, during a pandemic. So I think it offered a lot of really unique situations in my rotations that I had in the spring of last year whenever COVID was really heavy. I know my preceptors were very open to kind of hearing my feedback and what they could do to make the rotation still meet all of our objectives and still be what I wanted and get what I wanted out of the rotation. And they definitely were open to my feedback. And so That leads me to ask you all how the program has incorporated feedback. And this might be a good question also for either Twila or Tate to answer.
Yeah, we started doing this, I think around 2 years ago, where at the end of the year, we started doing what is called a SWOT analysis, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for the program. And that's like a 2-hour, 3-hour session where we just sit down with all the residents, PGY1s and PGY2s, and just talk about what went well from orientation throughout the whole year, including talking about projects, CEs, MUEs, everything. And we've gotten a lot of good feedback kind of from those sessions that we've implemented. I think a couple of things that we've done is we've kind of beefed up the on-call experience in the past few years, because I think one of the some of the feedback that we got from one of the residency classes was that it needed to be up a little bit, and there needed to be a little bit more maybe admin type of calls and experience with that. So instead of doing just clinical call, we added on kind of an admin portion of that to challenge the residents in that regard. And one other thing is one of our residents actually last year recommended that for the development plans that each of the residents create at the beginning of the year for their year, that goes over their areas of improvement, their strengths, and their goals for the year, to also add wellness goals to kind of make sure that we're tracking that from the residents' perspective, and that we're challenging the residents to still have a life outside of residency and do things that are fun, like going to work out or going for walks, trying new recipes, things like that. And so those are some of the pieces of feedback that we've kind of gotten and we've incorporated for the program.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. We get a lot of feedback from the residents and through different time points throughout the year, and try to incorporate that and make changes. We're very strategic and intentional with how we do those changes. With regard to preceptor feedback and how they give individual feedback, I think that's largely preceptor specific, and it's also largely resident specific on how they give individual feedback on what or how the preceptor handles that and what the resident wants. So oftentimes that's based on the resident needs and wants, and the preceptor how they adapt to that. So it's kind of specific to each of the respective groups.
I know I got more like on the spot feedback. Like this morning, Catherine was super slow, so I bought her a cup of coffee and said it's time to perk up because I got some stuff to do. And, but not all residents like that is for it. So some of my residents have said they like to be just quizzed with constant questions, and some don't like that, and they go into their shell when they hear that. But I know for me as a learner, if I don't hear something on the spot, I'll kind of forget what that feedback was even in relation to by the time it gets to Friday. So I know like most people will do feedback Friday, but I personally try to also do on the spot feedback as well as we go. And I encourage the members of the CV surgery team to give the residents feedback too, and ask them tons of questions and see how the residents go with it.
So I actually do something similar. I do like a feedback Friday thing, but if something kind of big happens, like a resident responds to a code or whatever, I'll give them feedback right then and there. And then I'll also go on Farm Academic and try to put in feedback there. There's like a on-demand type feedback thing that you could put in to Farm Academic, so I'll do that. And then again, depending on the residents, sometimes I'll quiz them on different topics. I encourage members of the BMT team to kind of reach out to the resident just to kind of give them that experience. And again, if a resident thinks they want feedback a certain way and it ends up not working that way, then I try to adjust my feedback style for that resident.
Yeah, and I know on every rotation I've been asked how I want to receive feedback, and usually either before we even start the rotation or on the first day, just so that my preceptor is aware of kind of what I'm expecting and what my style is. And then they've also pretty much all asked me my style of learning and how, just like Chelsea was saying, do I want to be asked constant questions, or do I want to be more of like a read and tell me tomorrow type person? So I think that they're very adaptable to really any type of learning style and any type of feedback style. So I think that's another strength of the program, is that they understand that we're not all identical and we don't all operate the same way, and they're willing to kind of tailor their approach to meet your needs.
Lauren, I thought you asked me how the program incorporates feedback. Sorry, I didn't know that you were talking about like how do we provide incorporate. Sorry, but let me answer
No,
that.
I did ask you that question. You're right, but it's a 2-for-1.
Gotcha. Well, I just wanted to add to that, and so Dennis hit on that about the on-demand feedback. That's something that we've really been pushing from a program's perspective, that we are getting more timely feedback from a preceptors group. After staffing shifts on the weekends, after staffing shifts overnight, we're having preceptors and those that work closely with the residents provide feedback whenever maybe preceptors aren't always around on their rotations. These are just off rotation types of staffing experiences and things like that. They're still getting that type of feedback. And so I think that you're definitely going to get a lot of feedback throughout the year. But I think that I echo what everybody else says. It just depends on the preceptor. I'm kind of very similar to a lot of different people and how they've answered it, where I give it kind of as things come up. I'll talk to the residents about things that they did really well or things that they could do maybe a little bit better. And I do a formal feedback Friday as well. But and sometimes I'll have them set goals for themselves for the next week too, where I'll have them sit down and like talk about what 3 things do you want to do for next week and what do you want to achieve. And I've had some good response with that type of approach as well for some of the residents.
All right, kind of switching gears on this one. I think this might be a good question for you, Lisa, to start with, but then of course anyone else can jump in. How is your rotation structured, and what's the degree of autonomy?
Yeah, I can talk about that. So our rotation is probably the most differently structured compared to the other rotations here at Methodist. So like I said, I work in the ER and we're a 4-person team. And so we have 2 people who work on day shift and 2 people who work on evening shift, and we rotate every 7 days. And so when a resident comes to rotate with us in the ER, they're either assigned to day shift or they're assigned to evening shift. And so they will rotate with both of those preceptors, and they'll usually just be with us during the weekdays. And then, but they'll work with all 4 of us on the team because we team teach all of our rotation topics. And so they get an opportunity to see all of the different learning styles that we have and the things that we do. And so just when it talked about feedback, we do a lot of communication between the 4 of us about kind of what's going on with this learner, what do you think they need? And then just to the degree of autonomy that you're provided, obviously at the beginning of the month, like you probably haven't been to different kinds of emergencies and things like that. So we're going to go with you. We're going to model kind of what we do in different kinds of emergencies. And then by the end of the month, the hope is that you can take care of any kind of medical emergency that comes into the ER. So we're going to let you run that code by yourself, and we're going to sit at our desk, or we're going to sit at the nursing pod and make sure that you don't need anything. We're going to make sure that, you have the skills that you need to be able to pick the RSI meds for a physician and be able to make those recommendations and pull them out of the Omnicell and draw them up. So the degree of autonomy is probably, it escalates throughout the month, and the hope is that you are very autonomous by the end of the month. We also do orders while we're in the ER. So it's kind of like an interesting mix of all these things. But you get to work with all 4 of us and see all of our different styles. And obviously day shift is a little different than evening shift because of the different acuity that comes in, the different support that we have, but it's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of autonomy that kind of comes with maybe there's multiple things going on and I know that you can handle this, so I might send you over to this room and I go to handle something else. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I was terrified of the ED when I first started PGY1. I know Tate knows this all too well. He convinced me to do the rotation, and I'm very thankful that I did, because I feel like that's one of the rotations where I probably grew the most last year. Definitely pushed me out of my comfort zone, but I was amazed by the end of the month, like just how much I felt comfortable doing, and codes didn't scare me anymore. I knew about RSI. I knew I could handle something walking in the door and I would be okay being by myself. And now I even, not too often, but randomly will pick up an ED shift. And I feel like that's just kind of a true testament to what Lisa was saying, where they're there from you when you don't know anything, and then they get you at the end of the month to be able to feel comfortable doing things that you really never thought that you might be doing. Does anyone else have anything they wanted to add on?
I'll
I'll
just add on, Lisa's not saying that they sit in a pod in the ED right next to the providers and they make you sit at the like main pharmacist desk. So there's no hiding from questions really. They just turn around in their swivel chair and they look at you and you're on the spot. So I think that helps residents a lot too. Sorry, Carolyn.
Oh, I was just going to say, Transplant has one of those hybrid models where you are going to get autonomy, but more towards the end of the month. And we have residents participate in order verification and MAR reviews in addition to their other responsibilities. So you'll see, or residents will see how much additional work they get towards the end and they'll become more autonomous. While on something like the hepatology rotation, because that's not directly covered by a transplant pharmacist all the time, it is what I keep calling independent study. You have to do a lot of work yourself, so it's very autonomous.
Yes, I am on the hepatology rotation right now with Carolyn. So that is like the quote of every day is independent learning, but I'm still learning a lot. And I know that Carolyn's still always there if I have a question. And the physicians also, I've had really good experiences with them so far, where I can ask them any question on rounds and they're very open to teaching me about that topic. So that kind of leads me to my next question of how would we describe our interactions with the different teams at the hospital? I know we've kind of touched on it a little bit, but if anyone wants to just kind of add a little bit more specifically with your team.
Our team or other teams? Like our team?
You can start.
Like my team?
Yeah.
Well, so my team, I am very important. They know it. And I make sure things get done.
You mean the physicians or our teams?
We mean pharmacy.
Rounding.
Yeah, oh, yeah, I said it right. I'm very important. We need pharmacy. People cannot leave without pharmacy education or medicines. It is so important. Nurses know, do not discharge someone. So, yeah, and they'll ask for us. Our attendings will ask and find out where are we if we didn't tell everyone, hey, I have a meeting right now. I'll come back later. So I am very much part of the team.
I'm so proud of you, Carolyn. That's awesome to hear.
Thank you so much. I try very hard.
I'll build on Carolyn. So my rotation is structured, I feel like typical rotations almost, I mean, during normal CV surgery times, but we start so early in the morning that there is not a ton of time to work up all your patients before rounds, unless you want to get there at like 5:30 in the morning, which no one wants to do, and I don't want to do that. So your very first day, yeah, it's going to be a little hard, and we're just going to learn them as we go. But the next days, we spend the rest of the day working through them. I would say, yeah, also equal member of the team. The physicians kind of look to me first because some of my PAs are newer. And so we're trying to teach them. I usually just give them my resident's phone number so they can just hit them up with every question. So you are jumping right into things. I want to be as important as Carolyn on the team. I'm trying. But I did take Carolyn's rotation with Heather when I was a PGY1, and I really liked the way that they have to educate all their patients. And I did incorporate that into my CVIC rotation as a first year resident, and now I do the same thing. So we do a sort of spreadsheet education that we have to do for the patients before they leave, because they have a lot of cardiac meds and I want to make sure that they take them so that their new vessels are going to last a long time. And my PA sort of adapted to the model because they're new. I just said this is the way it is, and over time our surgeons were like, have they been educated yet? And we've set a new standard for CV surgery, so that is good.
I think from a medicine standpoint, I kind of already alluded to it, but our attendings really think of us as co-attendings. And so we have med students, we have residents, interns, as well as the medical attending. And then we have some pharmacy students sometimes that I'll have on my rotation as well. So I think that there's a large team that we have, but we often get asked, our input before we move on to the next patient when we're talking to see if there's anything that, we need to add or any nuggets that we want to teach the team about. But they rely on us for all kinds of different drug information questions. And we're really involved in, the start to finish with the med recs and getting everything kind of started from an admission med rec standpoint to medications that are in the hospital and things that we're doing in the hospital to even discharge and prepping discharge medication reconciliations and making sure that all of those things are, going to be easily accessible. And we use our TOC colleagues as well to assist with those discharges too. So that's kind of our interaction with the team is, from they walk in the door all the way through and being just kind of drug experts and teaching them about different pieces of literature and things about the medications.
And we're kind of similar, probably not as important as Carolyn is to the team, but we, on the BMT service, our attendings definitely want us there, like as soon as they're there. I've been called by one of my attendings for being late. He just called me on my phone and asked me where I was, even though I was on my way. And we have weekly meetings, which is like our intake meeting to plan future bone marrow transplants. And we have a pretty big input in that in terms of just determining like conditioning regimens and other things. And then on the malignant heme service, since that's more of a teaching service, we do teaching for the fellows and any medical or pharmacy residents that are there as well, in addition to helping to determine optimal chemotherapy regimens for people with new diagnoses.
I think one group we're leaving out is nurses too. So I know like my CVI, and then the ED too are like specialized nurses. If my surgeons in the OR and the PAs are in clinic, they're going to call me, or if they're dealing with a different team, like they have a medical ICU patient holding in the CVICU and they don't know about an order or they feel weird about it, they'll call me first and say, is this right? Or what do I need to call and ask for? And they'll usually just bounce all their ideas off me before they're going to anyone else, because they know that we're the most trustworthy providers when it comes to medicines.
So we sit in the middle of the ER. Chelsea kind of alluded to that, but there's like a pod in the middle of the ER where the pharmacists sit. And so because we do that, we have nurses always coming up to our desk and asking us questions. And Chelsea kind of alluded to this as well, as like, we're going to put you in the hot seat. We're going to put you in the seat where we usually sit. We're going to sit next to you. Like we're not going to abandon you. But like, they're going to come to you and ask you all the questions. So like nurses are always coming and asking questions. We have EMTs coming and asking questions. And they're not just asking, like, can I give this? But they're asking, like, what's the mechanism of action of this? Like, why does it work? What can I tell my patient it's for? And then you have doctors who are coming up and they're like, well, what should I recommend for this? And then, they're calling an arrest over the radio and they're like, this girl took sodium nitrite to try and overdose. What am I going to do? And then you're running to the main pharmacy to get methylene blue for her methemoglobinemia overdose. So like, you're right there in the thick of things. And so I have been told many times that I'm a valued member of the team, which makes me terribly uncomfortable because of the Enneagram type that I am. I just don't like being told that. But you are a valued member of the team when you're in the ER.
Felt real tired after listening to all the things that you were getting pulled in and out of. I also thought that Chelsea was going to say one group we were leaving out was admin and what was their value. And so I kind of was thrown for a loop when it was nursing. But I do have something to add. So from an admin perspective, pharmacy is thought of as like the go-to person to fix problems. So if there's a problem and there's a quality issue, like for example, we were having too many post-op VTE events. So they said, pharmacy, how can you help? Well, we developed a strategy to ensure that pharmacologic prophylaxis was started. All the pharmacists have bought into it. And now our rates have been reduced by over 50% here. So, we are the ones that they come to fix just about anything. So we're highly sought after by not only the providers that we work with and nursing staff on a daily basis, but also by senior leadership members. I mean, I don't know if where else they're going to ask a pharmacist to lead the colon surgical site infection work group, because what do we have to add to a colon surgical site infection? We didn't do the surgery, but we have clinical thinking skills, we have communication skills, we have organizational skills. We just got all the skills needed to run a smooth team. And so we get pulled into a lot of stuff. We're amazing.
Bosses.
And definitely on Twilla's rotation, but really all rotations in general, just kind of like what Twilla was saying, we are involved in so many different things, which I think is also what contributes to us being really well-rounded by the time we're done with residency. I know just like looking at my CV when I've tried to add on for preparations for different things, I'm like, dang, I did a lot this year, and it's all like across the board. It's not like it's just focused in one area. I have things I can talk about from such a wide array of things. So that's another thing that I think is great about our program, is that we are so involved, not only just with things that we traditionally think of with pharmacy, but really throughout the hospital, we're involved in a lot of different projects. All right, so to wrap up, I have one more somewhat fun question. What do you all like to do in Memphis?
Carolyn, do you want to start that one? I know you're
I
big.
mean, Miss Memphis, you just, what is it? Okay, so we're still working on things with COVID. So like, I can't give you all that. We're gonna have to check the websites, but there's so many places you can go out to eat. Once they're available, you can go to the Orpheum for musicals. You can go to games. There's trolley night, which that might still work since that's outside. Hey, we have parks. If you're outdoorsy, and did I say eating?
Yes, I like
There's
eating
plenty of wonderful
too.
restaurants.
And we, me and my fiance eat a lot, and he lives in Nashville, but we still think that Memphis has way better food. And we have some restaurant groups here that have started a few different restaurants. So like the Gray Canary and Catherine and Mary's and Bishop, I think are all Andrew Michael. I'm not sure, but
Yes, they are.
so we, Carolyn, to incorporate all the things, like to get takeout because it's COVID and I'm scared, to the park, and then we eat it in the park. But I don't want to exercise too much, so we just kind of like sit and picnic over the river. And what else do I do? Oh, I went down to Broad Street recently, and there's cute little coffee shops, and it's an art district.
Mm-hmm.
It was awesome, and there was tons of people out riding their bikes. I wish I went there more before now, but I'm going to be hanging out there all the time.
I think we also have a lot of good breweries in town. I'm a big brewery guy, and we have a number of good breweries that have good tap rooms that I hope can open up soon and safely. We also, like people were saying, sporting events. So we have the Memphis Grizzlies, we have the Redbirds. We have a soccer team now as well, and Memphis University has a good football team, good basketball team. Shelby Farms is a good place to go, and I've been out canoeing and kayaking a few times in the past month, and it's a lot of things to do out there. There's disc golf out there if you're into disc golf. There's real golf as well in Memphis that have some nice courses. And then also music festivals and barbecue fest is a cool thing. May is a really, really fun month in Memphis. It was one of my favorite months of residency. There's lots to do in May in Memphis.
And as someone who isn't from Memphis, I can agree to all of that. I'm still trying to find all the good new restaurants to eat at. I was really looking forward to Memphis in May. This was going to be my first year doing that, but unfortunately that got canceled. Other things I do like to run, so I agree with Tate. Shelby Farms is a really good place to go running if you're into that, or just biking, anything outdoorsy like that. And then yeah, the breweries as well, especially once all of it like fully opens and everything. A lot of good food, a lot of good places to just hang out and do. There's a lot to do in Memphis of really whatever you're into.
Or if you want to stay indoors, the music studio where like Elvis started, Sun Studios, you can go there, Stack Studios, and I could just spit out a lot of facts about it, but I won't. I'll tell you it's really cool. You need to just go on the tour, and Overton Park's filled with museums as well.
Yeah, and barring COVID, we have a lot of festivals that come to Memphis. And so like the festivals are really fun. So like usually there's like Beer Fest, and then there's the Cooper Young Festival. There's like a lot of festivals that come. So hopefully COVID will eventually get to the point where we can go back to having our festivals, because they're a lot of fun, even if it is a little bit warm when they're happening. So.
And let's not forget, there's some decent shopping here for all my ladies or gentlemen that like to shop. We have Kendra Scott, we have anthropology, we have a whole, slew of nice places to shop for your admin attire when you get on that rotation.
Not just Target.
We also have a lot of
Target has a lot of good things, but yes, if you're going to elevate, then we do have some other places.
In an outlet mall. Let's bring that up with a coach.
We do. We do.
Who likes to shop local. We also have a lot of great local makers, and so there's a lot of places to shop local also if you like to shop local.
But if you like Target, the one on Colonial and East Memphis,
yeah, we can recommend a Target. That's always important.
Yeah, we've had a lot of fun doing happy hours too. I think there's a lot of really cool like outdoor hangout places for happy hour after we get done with rotations. And then there's our favorite one was Alchemy. They had really good happy hour, but they're currently closed for COVID, but hopefully they'll be back because we always went there. It's our favorite. But I think Memphis is a really good city for people that are in their 20s, just trying to still have a good time. There's a lot of medical professionals in the area. There's a lot of people from different disciplines. There's optometry, of course, all the physicians, physical therapy, nurses. There's a lot of young health professionals in the area. And so I think you have a lot of opportunity to kind of be around people that are of your age and kind of your same stage of life. So that's been a really fun thing for me to move to Memphis, and I've had a lot of enjoyment, and I think it's a great city and sometimes underrated, but definitely one that you should check out.
Did we not mention Bill Street? Nobody mentioned Bill Street either.
Yeah.
Because we're classy and
Are we? Are we all?
I don't know that we all are.
maybe it's because the spirit of COVID has blocked it out of our minds.
Probably.
The end of my residency, we got one of those bike bars, and we started not on Beale, but somehow we ended there.
It's a good place to end.
Usually how it
If
happens.
you don't know what Beale Street is, it's kind of like, what is the name of that
Urban
street?
Street.
Urban Street, yeah. Not as
Sorry,
long.
I'm on day 9. It's been a long week.
All right, well, that is all we have for today. So thank you all for your participation, and hopefully everyone will have found this video to be useful, and we hope that we will see you very soon in the future.